Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to our Cup of Tech webinar. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you're connected from in the world at the moment. We hope this finds you well. So thanks for taking interest today. We've got really interesting session on cloud computing coming up today with one of our experts here, AJ. He'll be looking at some of the or demystifying some of the jargon. And hopefully bringing it to life for you all today. We'll be taking a look at the various solutions and products out there on the marketplace, but also the frameworks and tools and techniques that help bring cloud computing to life, but also drive value for you or your organization. So it's going to be an interesting session. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. We have just some logistics. So we will be recording today's session. So by participating, you give your consent for us to use the recording for marketing purposes going forward. We hope that's okay with you. And we have muted your microphone through this Zoom webinar. That's just to allow AJ to cover the topics that we think will be of interest to you. But if you have a question, we do want to invite questions, and we'll have some time at the end to allow those questions to be put to AJ, and we can hopefully get some dialogue going at the end of the session. If you've got a question you want to raise that during the webinar, you will see in the Zoom window a Q&A button. If you hit the Q&A button, feel free to jot your question down there. And as long as AJ isn't on a roll, we may well interrupt him and put your question to him. Otherwise, we'll leave them at the end. We'll have some dialogue. We'll open up the microphone. So great, so I will hand over to AJ in a second, but before I do that, we just wanted to invite all of you to participate in a very quick poll, very quick survey, just so that we can gauge who's here today and what your experience is with cloud computing to date. So I'm just going to launch a poll here, and you should be able to hit the poll button, and you will see 3 questions. The first question is, how experienced are you with cloud services? You have three choices there. The second question is, which service or services from a cloud provider would be of interest to you or your organization? So there's a few options there that we've jotted down for you to select from. And the third question, if you or your organization decide to migrate or use cloud services, what would be the main constraints for you? One of cost, skilled resources, complexity, or security. So please do take a moment to make your selections there. We'd be really interested to see what the results are, and it will help kind of AJ kind of I guess focus on certain topics as we go through the webinar. We're seeing some answers come through. Thank you very much. Again, you should see for those that you haven't, you should see a poll button or polls. Just take a moment to fill that in. Thank you very much. Great, so I can see we're getting a mixture of some experience, people that have used cloud services, people that haven't used cloud services before, so I guess they're here to learn more. So you're at the right webinar, welcome. And question number 2, a mixture of services that people will be looking for right across the board here, AJ. So we've got people that will be interested in using cloud services for storage, virtualization, compute and processing, data analytics, data warehousing, security. So a real mixture there, a broad interest. So we can capture all of that as we go through. Mm-hmm. And the final question, again, a bit of a mixed result here. We're seeing a lot of people mentioning cost as potentially a constraint to integrating cloud in their organization, but also complexity. So that'll be an interesting one. I think that a lot of people think that cloud is, from our experience, something that's more complex than perhaps it is, a lot of terminology. So again, hopefully I think this session will be of use to you to just demystify some of that complexity. Great. Well, thank you. We've got a lot of responses in, so thanks very much for those that that voted. I'll leave that running for the time being. So if you get a chance, for those that haven't done already, please do click on poll and complete those There's 3 brief questions. Thank you. Okay, so Ajay, over to you for the remainder of the session, please.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and good morning and good evening, everyone, from my end. So, welcome everyone on this quick session on cloud computing, where we will discuss about what is cloud computing, or what are the different services or cloud service providers, and what kind of tools and techniques and solutions which they come up with. So I will straight away get into the topic, but feel free to ask me any questions during the session. Steve is here to assist me. And if there are any questions which pop up when I'm discussing a particular topic, feel free to just post it in the chat and we will take it. Although I would prefer to have, if you have any questions, you can write them down and might be you can ask them towards the end of session. However, if there is something which is very relevant and important right when I'm discussing the topic, we can take up the questions then and there. So let's get started here and let's understand what is cloud computing. Now, this would be a very quick presentation on understanding cloud computing, which is very vast when it compares to the set of technologies or technology suites and services and solutions which different cloud service providers are offering. So let's here spend some time in understanding why cloud computing, what is cloud computing. I will also focus in this session about Google Cloud Platform, such as benefits of GCP, as we call, or that is Google Cloud Platform. We'll talk about Google Cloud Platform and services. We will briefly also talk about Google's infrastructure. We'll do a quick comparison on GCP, where's your AWS, that is Amazon Web Services, and where's Azure, which is also a prominent cloud services provider, that is from Microsoft. And then we will have a quick look, or we'll do a quick hands-on where we'll see really how cloud computing can help, wherein just in a couple of minutes, you can be bringing up a service and you can provision machines or work on storage and various other services. So that would be the agenda here. So let's get started. Now, the first question is why or what is cloud computing? So when we talk about cloud computing, we are saying that there is a cloud provider who would be accessing or providing access to cloud resources via internet. So you could, when you talk about resources, you can be talking about servers, you can be talking about virtual desktops, software platforms, applications, storage services, and many more. So when we talk about cloud computing, it is basically enabling access to services over cloud or over internet, which are built on virtualization concept, and the payment model keeps it easier to use since it is shared resources. And when I say resources here, I'm talking about your different services, or you can say different options of your infrastructure, which might be required by an individual or an organization. So what is cloud computing? It is basically the use of hardware and software components to deliver a service over network. So we as users or organizations can use files, services, applications from technically any device which has connectivity over internet. So there are a lot of reasons where cloud computing is gaining a lot of popularity in recent past. So you can talk about automatic software integration, if you would want to think of backup and restore, if you would want to think of unlimited storage capacity, reliability, and the most important factor which organizations are looking at is cost efficiency. So when we talk about cloud computing, it is the infrastructure which is held by the organization, and the same infrastructure is then shared across various users across the globe at a very low cost, just because it's being shared, although there are dedicated resources also which can be used. And this can help any organization or any user to quickly start using the piece of infrastructure which is coming from the inventory of the cloud provider. So here we have a list of different cloud service providers. You have Amazon Web Services, which is quite dominant and prominent in the market. You have Microsoft Azure. I would say it's getting there, or some of its domains are getting more popular, such as machine learning. But then Amazon Web Services does have services and solutions for practically every aspect of an organization's need. Oracle Cloud, you have SAP, you have Google Cloud, you have Salesforce, you have Alibaba, and many more which are joining this list of cloud providers. Now, when we talk about cloud computing, it would be inevitable to talk, how does this really happen, or how is this cloud provider making it possible? And this is where virtualization comes into picture. So here on the screen, what you're looking at is a comparison between physical infrastructure and virtualized infrastructure. So you do have a physical layer, or you can say physical hardware, on top of which you have operating system, and then you would have your different applications or services. However, that is limited. It is not really fault tolerant. It is vertically scalable, I would say. And these are a lot of terminologies which I'm throwing in there, but then let's briefly talk. When you talk about scalability, you're talking about the capability to scale, capability to expand. Now, that would be better with virtualization in place, where you still have the physical hardware, but then there is a virtualization layer which is put right in between your applications and operating systems and services and your physical hardware. And that's how cloud service providers make it possible. Now, there is a lot of technology behind that virtualization, but then in simple terms, we can understand that the whole infrastructure is being provided access to based on virtualization. Now, here is a list of different types of virtualizations which are possible. I'll quickly run through this. So you have application virtualization, where an application is abstracted from the underlying operating system. So you could just think about wherein an application is created and it really does not depend on the operating system, so it can run in isolation. Similarly, we have desktop virtualization, where you can access a thin client desktop easily. You can be accessing it in any geographical region or a zone. You also have data virtualization, which makes it easier for you to have get away from the traditional ways of managing your data and data management. You have server virtualization, which is very useful for organizations who would want to immediately benefit from modernization or would want to migrate their solutions onto cloud. You have storage virtualization, where you really do not have to be bothered about the storage services or scalability of those, or basically capacity planning, and you can just depend on cloud service provider. You have network virtualization, which also helps us do the same thing. Now, when we talk about cloud computing, here, the most important thing is to understand your cloud computing service models. So you basically have three prominent computing service models which are offered by any cloud service provider. So you have infrastructure as a service, and you have platform as a service, you have software as a service, and then there is a new kid to the block, which is basically containers as a service. Now, this is quite new in past couple of years, and it has been gaining a lot of popularity. Now, before I go into talking about infrastructure as a service and what it does, if you guys have any question, please feel free to let me know. And if there are no questions, then might be I can go forward.
We did have one question posed, AJ, because we haven't opened up the microphone yet, but people are, we've
Sure.
had one question come through on the Q&A. So encourage everyone to raise a question on the Q&A if they wish. But the one that's come through is, can you just provide, or from your experience, what cloud platform is being preferred by companies at the moment, and is there a reason why?
Well, yeah, sure. So So why, let me get the question right. So why are organizations preferring cloud over the,
Yeah, it was more, let me read it verbatim. So which cloud platform is being preferred by organizations? So I guess which
okay,
of the platforms out there is preferred from your experience?
sure, sure. Well, there is a funny way and there is a technical way of answering this question. The funny way is, I would say, whichever cloud provider reaches an organization and convinces them about the solutions. But then, technically speaking, I would say um, AWS has been a long runner in this set of services which it is offering, and I would say that AWS has a major market chunk when it comes to organizations which are using AWS Cloud Platform and services. Google Cloud also is getting there, and some of services in Google Cloud are would be saying uh, lesser expensive and better when it comes to AWS. So the answer in short would be AWS, which is a prominent one. There are different solutions from AWS. We'll talk about that. Say you have S3, which is storage service. You have EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud. A lot of organizations are thinking of a processing framework on cloud, that is EMR, and so on. So AWS is getting a lot of popularity and being used by organizations.
Thanks, Ajay.
I hope that answers the questions. Any other questions?
Not at this time. Thank you, Ajay.
Okay.
We'll let you continue.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Okay, so let's also talk about these computing service models. And as the name says, when we say infrastructure as a service, we are talking about infrastructure which is owned and maintained and managed by cloud service provider. However, the access is given to the users or organization. So here, when we say that consumer doesn't have to be bothered about your infrastructure for their needs. So the capability provided here is to provision your resources. And when I say resources here, I'm talking about your processing infrastructure, storage, networks, and other computing resources, where consumer or customer can deploy and run any software on these. However, customer would be interested in using the infrastructure from cloud provider. Now, a simple example would be, say I do not have a really powerful laptop and I want to really run some applications, Java based or Python based, and these need a good amount of CPU and RAM. Now, I can really run to the market and buy a new laptop, or I can just create an account on AWS and Google Cloud, a free account, and then I can just get into compute domain and just spin up an instance in less than 3 minutes. And it will give me all the CPU, memory, storage requirement which I need. And I would be paying per second billing as per second. And once that is done, I can just get rid of that. So here I'm just using infrastructure directly where everything is ready for me and I just need to provision and manage it. So that's your infrastructure as a service. You have platform as a service. And this is again used by organizations where the capability provided to consumer or customer is to deploy onto cloud infrastructure. And you can have customer created applications using any kind of programming languages deployed on a cloud platform. Again, one of the main things here is the customer need not be bothered about managing what it needs to run those applications. They can just use a ready to use platform and then just start working on it. And there are a lot of platforms which you can straight away use. For example, if you would be thinking of deploying, say, a automation or deployment service, you can straight away use a platform. And there are various other examples which I'll show you when I am browsing through the Google console. Now, software as a service, as the name suggests, there are a lot of software as a service where the customer would want to directly use the software and pay for the billing time. Now that could be in seconds, that could be on the data uploaded, that could be on the data transferred, and different aspects. So you have the prominent ones or known ones are such as you have Google Drive, you have Dropbox, you have Google Docs and Google Sheets, and from AWS also you have different softwares which can be straight away used by customer. So if we look at the overall division of I would say division of labor here, but then we can just say what is the involvement of customer. So you have on-premise infrastructure, and that's all managed by the users or organizations, and that's where the pain is. A lot of organizations would want to start with infrastructure as a service, where they would still manage the applications, data, runtime, middleware, and operating system. However, they will leave the pain of managing the servers and storage and networking to the cloud provider. As they advance, or I would say as they mature in using the cloud platforms, might be they move to platform as a service where they are very confident about the cloud service provider. They know their dependencies are being met, and they can straight away focus on their applications and data. And then there might be organizations which are fully matured in using cloud computing services, or might be individuals who would want to straight away use something from cloud provider rather being bothered about any of the deployments. And that's where software as a service comes into picture. Now, the last part here is about your container as a service, and this is getting a lot of popularity. You might have heard of Dockers and Kubernetes, OpenShift platforms, and so on. So a lot of organizations are now trying to reduce the cost, and that's one of the things which was mentioned in the polls also. So when you talk about costing, one of the main things is organizations do not want to deploy applications and software on machines, take care of the dependencies. When I say dependencies, I'm saying, say you need a Java application to run and you would need a compiler. That's a simple example. So if all that could be packaged as a container, that is, you would develop an application, but you would just package it as a module, and then anyone could just run it in a runtime rather than being worried about what the system contains. And that's where container as a service comes into picture. And we can see when we talk about container as a service, you have these containers, or basically the logical abstraction of your application or service, which can be used by users or organizations. So these are your different cloud computing service models. Now, if again, I would be asking out if there are any questions on these computing service models, or something makes you inquisitive, please let me know, or I can go ahead.
Yeah, I think we can press ahead, AJ. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I think we lost the screen sharing, but don't worry, I'm just switching the presentation slide, so I will be back here. Yeah. So let's continue, and yeah. So let's dig deeper. Now we have established some fundamentals about your cloud computing. Although we have lesser amount of time, let's quickly look into your cloud computing or service providers. So here we will talk about GCP. That's your Google Cloud Platform. As I said, Google Cloud Platform also has a lot of services, and in recent past, it has been gaining a lot of popularity due to its services, due to its costing. And it is basically, I heard the recent project which GCP or Google backed was with a long-term project with Deutsche Bank in Germany here. And they have got into a long-term project where Deutsche Bank will be using Google Cloud Platform and services. So when you talk about Google Cloud Platform, let's quickly talk about the various reasons why somebody would choose GCP. And obviously, GCP has a better pricing compared to its competitors. There is a per second billing, and it also depends on which service you are using. In certain services, you can store your data there, but then you don't have to pay for data uploading or data storage. However, you will be paying for querying the data. You also have speed and performance, which Google Cloud offers, because Google Cloud is basically offering you or the organization the same infrastructure which is being used by their search engine or YouTube for that matter. So you have possibility of live migration of apps, and this is one thing which organizations are very much interested in, where they do not want a downtime, where they want a, when you say MTBF, that is mean time between failure, has to be as least as possible. So they would want to live migrate apps without having any kind of downtime. And then you have big data, which has gained a lot of popularity in past years, where you're talking about huge volume of data which needs to be managed, stored, and processed. And that's where Google Cloud comes in. So when you talk about Google Cloud Platform, it is again a set of services which are provided by Google on the same infrastructure which it has been using successfully over years. Now, when you talk about benefits, as we say, you would be using an infrastructure which has been well designed, scales as per need. So it does offer high productivity. You can work from anywhere. As I said, that's the basic paradigm of cloud computing, that if you are connected to internet, you can basically connect to the cloud service provider and access the services. You can quickly collaborate with different teams and different projects. You have the cloud service provider, in this case, Google Cloud or Google, taking care of security when it comes to security or encryption or compression. So there are different ways in which security is managed as per compliance and requirements. You have fewer data which are stored on vulnerable devices. So you really have something which you can rely on. You have flexibility or scalability. And then obviously the most important aspect of anyone venturing into cloud computing is cost effectiveness. So when you talk about Google Cloud Platform services, these are some of the services which we talk about Google Cloud. So you have compute, which basically allows you to provision machines. You have storage, which allows you to throw in any kind of data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured. You have networking, which allows you to create your own private cloud. You have big data related services, which allows you to manage your big data. And when I say big data, I'm not even talking about terabytes or gigabytes. I'm talking about petabytes and exabytes, although no company is processing zettabytes as of now, but then petabytes and exabytes. You have developer tools, you have identity and security management, you have Internet of Things, and that's getting a lot of popularity these days with all the radar and LiDAR data coming in, autonomous driving coming into place, and so on. You have artificial intelligence, management tools, and data transfer. So these are some of the services, and we can learn deeper about each of these services if we had more time. But then just to understand that each of these services which we have been looking here have, I would say, different branches of services which are being offered by Google Cloud. So before we get to the question Q&A, I would just want to show you here the Cloud Console. Now, one of the things is that anyone could create a free Gmail account. They can go for a free account. And if you see here, it shows I have 256 free credit. So everyone who creates a cloud account to access Google Cloud gets a $300 free credit. And that's the beauty of it. You can be using any of the services from the list of services, and you will only be paying for what you use, and that would go from your free $300 credit. So Google has been quite generous in doing this. Now, in the same way, AWS also, a free account can be created, and then you can have a free tier account. Gives you access to 750 hours per year, and you can use free tier services for free. So we'll get into this, but before we use any demo or we look into these services, are there any questions? Do you have any doubts or comments? Please let me know.
So we did have a question that's relatable to, I think, the demo that you might just show us, AJ. And it was a gentleman that wants to know what is big table in Google Cloud.
Sure. Okay. So Yeah, when I come to demo, I can talk about it. But as of now, you can just understand Bigtable is this one of the services which is being offered by Google Cloud, which allows you to store huge amount of data. It is a, I would say, columnar database, a NoSQL database, or in fact, it's the beginning of NoSQL databases. When Google presented Bigtable, that's where all the different other NoSQL databases have come into picture, such as Cassandra, you have MongoDB, you have HBase, which is Hadoop's database, and that's based on Bigtable. So wherein you can have huge amount of data stored and you can scale as the need goes, and it's really huge. I mean, it would not um, it would be one of the ways where you can store huge amount of data across the globe and just scale it horizontally. So I'll come to that. Now let's take it further and let's understand about Google's infrastructure, how Google makes it possible. So you have now we all know that Google has one of the most powerful infrastructure in the world, and that's available in two levels. So you have the physical infrastructure and abstract. So when you say physical infrastructure, that consists of deployment of high efficiency backend data centers. And there are these data centers which are spread across the globe. They are increasing the number of data centers which can support customers across geographical regions. And you have a backbone network which is very strong. So you have global meshed redundant backbone network, which basically allows it possible to use all these different services. You have different edge points of presence, and that basically allows the communication between the client's place and the data center easy. You have edge caching, so you also have caching platform that it basically helps their network. Now, there are lots and lots of details here, but then that would be beyond the scope of this small presentation. But let's understand. So you have zone. Now, when you say zone, that's compute engine can be considered as a zonal resource. So that is equivalent to a data center and a single point of failure. Regions are geographical areas. So you could have, say, Europe or US or Middle East as a region, and within that you could have multiple availability zones. You have global resources which are accessible across the regions or the zones. So you could have zonal resources which are restricted to a particular zone, regions which can have multiple zones, and global resources. Now you have these different services which we can learn about. So here is a quick comparison of your Google Cloud with Azure or GCP. So when you talk about availability zones, that's available in AWS. So AWS has 69 availability zones as of when this documentation was being prepared. You have 22 geographical locations, and it is planning to expand. Azure has 54 regions, and your GCP is available in 200 plus countries. However, when you talk about the region count, that's still growing. When you talk about virtual servers, AWS has EC2 as a service where you can just quickly deploy machines and start using them. You have Azure, which gives infrastructure as a service. So that's providing the user to deploy and manage a virtual environment inside a virtual network. And GCP has your compute or VM instances where we can set up any number of machines, or might be create templates so that you can set up machines. You have platform as a service. So AWS comes with Beanstalk, that's an orchestration service for deploying applications. And in maintaining these applications, Azure has different platforms where users can run their applications. And then Google has Google App Engine. So when you talk about serverless computing, you have certain things like AWS Lambda, Azure has its functions, and GCP also has functions. So when you say serverless computing, I would want to emphasize here, it is basically a way wherein users can run their applications or functions or code without really provisioning machines. They can just push in their code and just run it and check if it's working well. And then they can decide if that has to be deployed on their infrastructure or a cloud platform. Now, one of the prominent use cases is object storage. Now, AWS has S3, it also has Glacier, it has Deep Archive, and many other services which allow you to just push in any kind of data over cloud service storage. You have Azure, which has something called as blob storage, which allows you to store huge amount of data. And Google Cloud also has object storage, where you can technically store any kind of data. So when you look at the advantages of all these cloud service providers, well, most of them offers the same services in different ways, but then certain cloud service providers are good when it comes to security and reliability. Or if you talk about Google Cloud, then it is good in pricing and competition. So disadvantages wise, also cloud service providers have some disadvantages. So you have basically AWS, which has some limitations in EC2 service. The technical support fee might be a little higher, and you have certain downtime if you are not really paying for the services. Choosing the best option, I would say. In Google Cloud, your support fee can be quite hefty. It has complex pricing schema. However, in case of Google Cloud, you can still choose the services with the right pricing options. So that's a quick run on different services or comparisons. Well, we could spend more time, but might be in future coming sessions. So here, let me bring up the console and let's do a quick demo in provisioning instances. And that would be one of the things where you will see really the power of cloud computing, which allows you to do things in a couple of minutes. So let me share my screen here. Just give me a minute. Screen, and yeah. So now, as I said, I hope everyone is able to see my console. So that's your Google Cloud Console. In the same way, you can have a AWS and Azure account also. It's a free account created. Now here, as I said, you have different services. So normally when you log into Google Cloud Console, it will have automatically a project created. Now in this case, my project is some name, I can change it. You have the different APIs or services which you can see, such as Compute Engine, your billing options, monitoring, and so on. And here in these services, you have compute domain, and that basically has App Engine. You have Compute Engine where you can deploy machines. You have Kubernetes functions, VMware for different use cases. Storage has huge options. So this is where we have Bigtable, right? And this is what one of you was asking about. So basically a way wherein you store huge amount of data. So it's a fully managed wide column NoSQL database, which gives you low latency and replication, and that's auto built. So there is a lot of details about the Bigtable infrastructure, but you can just understand that this is a columnar database where data is stored not in rows but in columns and can store huge amount of data. However, we'll not get into Bigtable. Let's get into Compute Engine and let's see how does that work. So here I can go to the option which says VM instances. And this is where I can deploy an instance and I can just straight away connect to it. There are different ways of doing it. So here you see there is an instance running. Now I also have something called as instance templates where I can create a template and I can deploy any number of machines. Let's keep it simple for now. So you have VM instances, and here you have an option which says create instance. So what I can do is, let me just go ahead and create an instance. Now there are different ways to connect to it, from a terminal, from the SSH client which Google gives. You also have the Cloud Shell you can work with. So here I'll give an instance name and let's call it test instance. It would be good to have test instance 1. and we can basically choose the region. Now this is where it talks about the geographical regions. Since we are in Europe, might be we can choose Europe West 3 Frankfurt, and zone, let it be any one. So you have multiple zones where you can take the benefits of replication or availability. Now here you have different machine configurations. There is, huge list of options which you can choose from. So you have general purpose, you have memory optimized, you have compute optimized, and you have different series here. So I will go for N1, which is a general purpose. Now, once we do that, we can choose the machine type, and this gives you an access to micro machines or a powerful machine, something like with, you can go all the way up where you can see 96 virtual CPU cores and 360 gigabyte RAM, and high memory machines or high CPU machines. So we will choose a nominal one here. Let's go for 1 virtual CPU core and 3.75 GB RAM. That should be enough for now. Now you can also deploy a container image in this. You can choose the distribution of, say, Linux or Windows. So you have different options such as public images, custom images, snapshots, and existing disks. So we can go for operating system. Let me choose Ubuntu. And here I can choose one of the versions. Let me choose 18.4. And you have options to choose your disk, where you could go for SSD based disks or HDDs. SSDs would be more reliable, however, a little expensive. And your SDDs would be lesser expensive, but not as reliable as SSDs. So I can give it size. Let's give it 20. Let's go for selecting this option. Now you do have options here to allow default access or access to some APIs. You can access HTTP or HTTP traffic. Now what we can also do is we need to set up the security aspect. So when I click on the security aspect here, so I need to basically give in a key so that I can connect to this machine. Now that can be done if you would want to use an external client to connect, and that can be done here. So for that, there is an option. Let me see if you are seeing my screen. Just give me a minute. Okay. So I hope everyone is seeing my screen here now. So here I have an option called PuttyGen, which can allow me to create a key, which I can use to connect to the machine. So I can just click on generate, move my cursor here, and that basically creates a key. And what I can do is I can just give it some name. If I want, I can give a password, and I can save this as a private key. So once I do this, I can just give it a name. So I can say HDU, and that saves as a PPK file. And that's my file, which I can be using. So I can just test it by loading it here. And this is my key, which can be used to access the machine. So I have the PPK file, which can be used. Now let me switch back to the console. I hope everyone was able to see my screen, right? Okay, so let's go back to the console. Yeah, and you just saw quickly I created a key. So now I'm back to the console. I can just give my key here, and you see it gets resolved to the name. And then you can just say create. That's it. Your instance is done. Your instance is created. And it will be up and running in a couple of seconds. Now, I did create a key which has a private and a public key so that I can use external clients to connect to this. However, since the machine is up and running, you can just connect here by saying SSH, open in a browser window, and that will take just a couple of seconds. So while I was explaining, in less than 2 minutes, I was able to set up a machine, and basically this is trying to connect. So that's one way where I'm straight away connecting to this machine. It says connecting. So there are some firewall rules which are basically taking care of accessing these machines, and that we can always look into from here. So if you see, and you have the view network details, you can always look into this one, and that will show you what kind of firewall rules are set up. As of now, it's quite lenient, where I have just allowed access to your different protocols and ports, and nothing is getting blocked. However, we can control that, and I can go back to my compute, and then I can go into the instances. So I was connecting using a browser, and let me see if you guys are able to see my browser. So this is the one, and you see here, now we have a terminal open, and I can basically look into the file system. I can basically log in as root. I can basically say apt-get install, might be, we can say wget, and we can just go ahead and install. We can start using the instances. So that's in very short or brief way where we have looked at setting up an instance. And similarly, there are lots and lots of services which we can look at, which can be set up in just a couple of seconds. Or I will not say seconds, but minutes would be fair enough. So yeah, so that's a quick demo on using instances. Now, similarly, we could look at storage aspect and so on, but that's beyond the scope here. But I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have on working with these. So, I mean, I might add certain things here. So the key which I had created, if I have a external tool, 1 second. I do understand, yeah. So if I have an external client such as PuTTY, that can also be used to connect to the machine, since I have created this private and public key. So yeah. So let me get back to the presentation, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask the questions, or any kind of discussion you would want to have on cloud computing. I'm more than happy to answer.
Thanks, AJ. Just for those participating, we haven't had any more questions come through on the Q&A, so I've just opened up the microphone. So if you do want to ask a question of AJ directly, feel free to put that to him now. Seems like we might have a shy bunch today, AJ. Is there any questions for AJ? Did you find that useful? Is there anything that wasn't covered that you wanted to hear more about?
Hello?
Yes, hello. We can hear you.
I just want to know what
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead. We can hear you.
I just want to know what kind of certifications that are needed for cloud computing.
Okay. So see, when you talk about cloud computing, there are actually a lot of certifications which are prominent in market. When you talk about Google Cloud, then you have such as Google Cloud Engineer, you have DevOps related, machine learning related. So what you can do is, let me share my screen and quickly show you here. So you can obviously go into Google Cloud certifications, and that's basically the list of, let me share my browser. That's one thing in, yeah. Okay, so here you see, when you talk about Google Cloud certifications, you have Associate Cloud Engineer, you have Professional Data Engineer, you have Cloud Architect, Cloud Developer, and also G Suite based. So these are some certifications. However, and there is a lot of documentation also. I have opened up the page here. I will show you. So if you go to cloud.google.com/docs, you can find really huge documentation for everything, whether it is about best practices or your different technical domains. For example, if I just go in here, and here you have architecture or big data and analysis. So you can look at different solutions and cloud products. So if I go into Compute Engine, you have a lot of tutorials which you can learn from. So you can I mean, I would suggest if you are having some experience with Linux machines or working with servers and so on, then you can always go into these documentation, which I'm seeing here. And then you can be targeting something like a cloud engineer or a data engineer. So those are your Google Cloud certifications. If you talk about AWS, so for example, I can go into aws.training.certification. And here, what you can do is one, you can create a free account. For example, let me try logging onto my account. Okay, and I hope let's see if the password is right. Yeah. So what you can do, you again have a lot of certifications here. So one of the prominent ones is AWS Solution Architect, but then you also have something like Big Data Specialty and so on. So if you click on Schedule New Exam, you can basically choose from the list of exams depending on what kind of domain or stream you're working in. So you see here, you have Cloud Practitioner to begin with, and that's pretty basic understanding about different services. I hope everyone is seeing my browser.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So we have certified associate exams, and this is where you have solution architect, you have SysOps and developer, you have professional level exams, which are solutions architect and DevOps. And these are the specialist exams, such as your data analytics specialty, you have machine learning specialty, and you can also see if they have been deprecated, then you would see the new ones. And these are some of the certifications in AWS. And similarly, you have in Azure also. So, I mean, if you are planning to take certifications, I would say, I mean, since you might be from a technical background, I'm not sure, but then might be you can straight away aim for something at an associate level rather than practitioner. You don't need to really do that. That's just for someone to have a basic introduction. So you can go for associate level, and then you can go for professional level. And same thing is with Google also.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, get it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions from anyone else? Nope. Okay. What I would also suggest is you can also look into, let me share my browser again if that's not being shared, and I'll just show you. Yeah, so let me share the browser, and here you can always look into my GitHub repository, although there are a lot of repositories which I'm maintaining, and here there is one repository on AWS Work. So this basically has some working and some certification information. So Cert Prepare folder talks about the specialty exam that was for some of my participants and students. I've given some documentation here about a sample exam and white paper, and also working basically shows different kind of documents I've prepared for working with different AWS services. I'm coming up with something on Google Cloud also as of now. So you have different repositories which you can use from here. I have also cloned something on Bigtable from Google Cloud, and you have various other repositories. So feel free, you have a lot of content there and you can learn from there. And similarly, one of the best ways to learn about cloud computing would be one, obviously from a reputed organization. Second is through GitHub or your projects on GitHub.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I see a question from Abhi. I'm a student and I'm interested in cloud platform. When is the time to get into it? Well, if you are interested in getting into cloud, then I think you should straight away start working on cloud platform from now. I mean, it just takes you to create a free Gmail account. And I believe in what you say, frugality. So sometimes what you can just do is you can create a free account, try up the services, delete the account, create a new account, and you get free credits. I mean, that's one way where you are using their product and they are happy to give you those that access, because that basically also lets their product being used. So you can create a free tier account on AWS or a Google Cloud, and then you have a lot of ways in which you can slowly start picking up one or two services, and then you learn deeper into it. So I think that it is the right time. And with this COVID situation, you should also think of a lot of work is now happening remotely. So again, the requirements, the infrastructure requirements have gone way high, right? And that's where scalability and easy provisioning of resources comes into picture. So cloud computing is going to get bigger and bigger. Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah, AJ, thank you. I'm just we're coming up to the top of the hour. I just be remiss of me not to mention that for those of you that are interested in certification paths or indeed learning more about cloud computing at a practical level, we are promoting some micro learning sessions. So as a training organization, we have a full suite of training programs that you could enroll in. But if you are interested in just taking your learning a little bit further, without committing too much at this stage, we are running some micro-learning sessions. Fantastic way to learn a little bit more, but in a practical way. So AJ will be delivering these in the coming weeks. They last between 2 hours and 4 hours, depending on the topic. And we're running these at a promotional discount. So we'll follow up with an email advertising those micro-learning sessions that might be of interest to you to start your cloud computing journey. Thank you. Are there any other questions? We maybe have time for one more question if somebody has something on their mind. It's a quiet bunch today. Well, thank you very much, AJ. I hope you all found that interesting and of use. I think that was a very good whistle-stop tour of some of the platforms and a focus on Google's proposition in particular. And I hope that was of value to you all today. We'll follow up with a copy of the recording so you can play it back or share it with friends and colleagues. And we hope to see you all soon at the next series of webinars. Do follow us on LinkedIn and do connect with us to see what upcoming webinars we have scheduled. If nothing further, we wish you all a good day ahead.